Empirical rule for data with a bell-shaped distribution. Now, the empirical rule states that for data sets having a distribution that is approximately bell-shaped, the following properties apply. We would say that about 68% of all values fall within one standard deviation of the mean. About 95% of all data values fall within 2 standard deviations of the mean. And about 99.7% of all values fall within 3 standard deviations of the mean. So let's take a look at this graph because it's really important to understand this figure. Okay, so if you look down in the middle, we have our sample mean. Now, to the right of that is the sample mean plus 1 standard deviation. To the left of it is the sample mean minus 1 standard deviation. And again, if you come up here, it says 68% of all values fall within 1 standard deviation of the mean. So here's our numbers. You see 34.13 and 34.13. Let's add those together. So if we get 34.13% plus 34.13%, that gives us approximately 68%. That's why we're saying that this is 68% within 1 standard deviation from the mean. Okay, now let's take a look at the next thing. Now, again, here's our sample mean. Now let's take a look at one further here. So if we take the sample mean and then add 2 standard deviations, or the sample mean minus 2 standard deviations, again, 95% of all those values fall within 2 standard deviations from the mean. Now remember, the middle we already calculated. So now we have an extra 13.959% on both ends. So let's go ahead and add those. So if we add 13.59% here plus 13.59% over here, then that should give us approximately 95%. So again, you can see here that 95% are within 2 standard deviations. Okay? Now, let's take a look at 3 standard deviations above the mean. So here's our sample mean plus 3 standard deviations. That's an extra 2.14%. And over here, the standard sample mean minus 3 times standard deviation is 2.14%. Now remember that about 99.7% of all values fall within 3 standard deviations of the mean. So let's add those percents. So if we add 2.14 plus 2.14, that gives us about 99.7%. Okay? Now, anything outside of that is way out of our data, which could possibly be an outlier, okay, or significantly low or significantly high, because anything above 2 standard deviations or below 2 standard deviations, which we saw earlier, would be significantly low or significantly high. So let's add that 0.13. So we're going to add 0.13 plus 0.13, and that gives us almost 100%, which is what we want. That's what the entire bell curve is going to be, 100%. But we need to get familiar with this so we understand the empirical rule. Now remember, this represents the empirical rule only for a bell curve distribution.